Hello, everybody. This is Peter Mullen here from American Consumer Credit Counseling. Today's session is about saving for emergencies, which is always a great thing. So I received a lot of questions from folks. A lot of people registered for today. We're very happy for that. We had 18 states represented, about 26 questions I have ahead of time. So we'll be using some of those. If you do not provide us live questions during this, we will certainly use some of those. Again, Peter Mullen here. I'm both a presenter and a provider of financial literacy and also free financial counseling. I'm from an organization, it's a nonprofit in the Boston area, and what we do is we provide this free literacy all over the United States. And we also have programs here, just as an FYI. If any of you are in fact finding yourself with a lot of, let's just say, credit card debt or unsecured debt, that's one of the few things we do for a profit here. We'd love to have you look that up. We have a number at the very end if you want to call, and I can tell you more about that if anyone wants to know. I have my email posted here in the front because I do want people to be able to contact me at any time. Today we are in a listen-only mode. I'll be talking to you about saving for emergencies, and we will break at various times. I have my colleague Maddie, who is assisting me on this. If we get a lot of questions, which we hope, I'll pause at various times, trying to supplement the questions that you've already asked me. Just a little note too, to say that we have always webinars twice every month. We have the next one coming up right before Halloween. And of course, that one is called Battling Money Monsters, right? That's on 10/28. It's really all about debt. Okay, so why don't we get started with our session today, tell you about what we're going to be covering, and then we will move on again to some of the questions that you've asked us. Okay, our goals for today. The main things that we're trying to cover today, we got some great questions, as we said, is, you know, what can you do with unexpected money situations? And I wanted to say, this is both unexpected monies you pay out and, in some cases, unexpected money you receive. So we'll talk about both, interestingly enough. But also, I want you to understand just some of the things you can do to help you sleep at night a little bit better. I know this is a concern for a lot of folks, so we're going to cover what I call some of the mechanics of how you can do this. What do you put in place to make it happen? But I also want to emphasize so very much at the beginning that it's important for you to motivate on the gains that you need to get from saving a little bit of money. Yes, it takes a little bit of work. So we want to make sure that you're motivated and find the pluses of doing this. So when I stop at various points and ask questions, I will then be opening it up to your questions that you can send in through typing in the response to the questions that I ask you. If I open it up to you, you can respond back to us. Okay, the agenda today is, again, talking a little bit about what I call double pain avoidance. I think there's a couple things we're trying to avoid here. So I want to show you the negative just so we can avoid it and focus on the positive. That's the relief of what savings can do. A little bit of savings goes a long way. How do we do it? We automate it. There's ways to do that. We have mechanics to do that. I want you to prioritize and show you some ways we can do that. And it's all about two levers. We always have two levers in our financial worlds. And that is what can we do to increase the income side? How can we add to that? And what can we do to decrease the expense side? Those two levers are like a seesaw that we want to always push as much as we can. So starting out, into every life, a little rain must fall. Here's the challenge for all of us. The fact is, it's going to rain. It's going to rain. What happens with a lot of folks, this is the old joke, but it's true. Why don't you fix the roof? Well, I can't because it's raining out. Can't fix the roof right now. Can't go out there and do that. Well, hey, it's sunny out now. Sun's shining. Well, I don't need to fix the roof because, hey, it's not raining anymore. So what happens? As a result, you never fix the roof. Never gets solved. But we have to begin to think a little differently here and take a more proactive stance. So a lot of the questions that you asked, a lot of them had to do with keeping the discipline of how do you make this work? Well, we have some tips on how to do that. And I believe me, you will sleep much better at night when you practice some of these tips. So let's start out, unfortunately, I'm going to start out with the negative side, and I call this double pain avoidance, because if you don't have an emergency fund, there's a number of things that begin to compound and put us in kind of a more challenging position. So let's talk about some of the things that do happen, and you all know this from when it is raining, right? So what are examples of raining? And a lot of you brought these up. These are things that happen in our lives. So one of the costs, one of the pains we face is the event itself. And I assume that some of you can relate to these, and some of you talk about them. They're things you don't expect. And that's the whole reason why they're in this category, because you don't know when they will come. You know that one day they will come. So the secret of everything we talk about today is to try to find some way to set aside something. Now, I know that's going to be tough for some, and I'll relate some of your questions you brought up, but we're going to give you some ideas, hopefully, that will make this happen. So these are not fun to experience, especially number 8. Actually, I had a number of folks, when I used to run this for other sessions, I never had number 8 here. But a lot of people have talked about the fact that going, obviously, to try and to an alternate location for somebody in the family, that obviously that causes travel that's unexpected and many other expenses that occur. So these are the challenges we face. So what else happens here? The alternatives if we do not have an emergency fund. So I'm trying to get you to focus for a minute on the negative side so we can avoid it. If you do not have any money put aside, $100, $500, even $10, the alternatives that we have, unfortunately, help to make, unfortunately, some negative problems even worse. So I'm hoping to avoid these things. I don't want us to run up our credit cards. I know that's sometimes what you have to do. But what's happening now with COVID is a lot of the stimulus funds are gone, and I'm hearing and reading that credit card debt is starting to go up again. If you take money out of your 401k, that's a temporary fix, but you're going to have to face that later on at some point. When you do things like not paying on bills, the number you wrote back and said, hey, I have too many bills. I get that. But there are challenges or choices you have in terms of paying minimums at cases, because getting this emergency fund should be job number 1. And if you stop paying bills, then of course your credit goes down, and that causes secondary problems. Visiting a loan shark means you're going to pay more fees. And overall, I look to number 8 here and simply say, if you start to use these costly alternatives, then some of the problems from the first list begin to compound on the second list. Let's talk a little bit about some relief, because I want to focus on the positive, and think about how we in life often deal with this. So paying a little bit of money outside is not unusual, and I want us to focus on what that is about, and then of course start to pull in your questions and your thoughts that you brought. So thinking about the relief side, before we jump to the solutions, just consider some of these things. We do put out a little bit of money to ensure that we have a fire extinguisher, to make sure that we can put out fires, because those are so negative and so devastating. Putting out a little money for that is worth avoiding that problem that a fire causes. We see this whole idea about insurance. We all know about insurance. How do you get away from it? Car insurance, life insurance, house insurance, even pet insurance, right? And you put out a little bit of money to help ensure that these things are taken care of. Again, the concept being a little bit of money on this end helps to avoid a lot of costs on the other end. So I'm hopefully getting us motivated toward that. Yes, I threw a bulletproof vest in here again. Another good investment for some folks, save your lives. Hopefully that's nobody here in the audience. And then of course, there's the financial cushion. This is a great thing to have. And why is this all important? This is all critical for us to think this way, because in the end, it helps us sleep at night. Why did I use this illustration? Because so many of the articles I've read, and you'll see them in the references, all talked about the whole point of this is not only to have a little set aside to give you that relief, but because it's less stressful. It doesn't rob money from your other goals, and it's something you've planned ahead for. So with that, I'm going to start going to ways that we can make this happen. But I want to see if there's any questions by anybody first, and see if anyone wants to ask anything, if I can get to this, and ask if there's any questions. So I will simply ask that here. If there's any questions that are coming up. And no, but I would hope that you would do. I can read this, a little bit hard. I'll pass that over to you, and you can respond. So while I'm going through this, please pass some of your questions over so far. So let's talk about some of the things that you brought up about in planning for this in your registration. Some of you did bring up a budget. So that's secret number one. You need to start with a foundational budget. Step one, a lot of folks, again, I know that it's not always fun to do. A lot of people don't like doing budgets, but the first step in trying to solve the pains that we talked about is for you to be very clear on the monies that you make and on the monies that you spend. That is what a budget is. So by starting there, you're going to then have the capability to begin to make some of the decisions. So that's step one. Step two, get to know the monthly income and expenses. And what you're looking for is any way that you can find a gap. Obviously, this sounds too much common sense, right? You have to do that. But you can begin to do that right from the beginning because you can separate your accounts. Here's the great thing about automation today. And this is the secret. Don't do it manually. Don't do it in envelopes. Don't see the cash. As soon as you get some kind of a raise or any type of a change at work, right from the get-go, have so much, 99% of your funds go to one account, 1% go to another. 1% is what most people can afford. And that's a choice you make. But the whole key here is that separated. You're separating it out and you're not touching it. So people talked about, well, how do you make this work? Mechanically, it's quite simple. I understand the challenge, and we'll talk about this. How do you either increase the income side or decrease the expense side? So we'll get to that in a second. But for right now, the mechanics of it are pretty straightforward. If that doesn't work, then I'll open multiple accounts. And people say, well, how do I do this? It's very simple. Your bank, your credit union, your place of work, all have these all ready to go. And they generally do not charge you anything for this. This is a simple accounting move where money is moved to one fund or another. You identify what it is and just do not touch it. So let me bring up another point so many people brought up for this seminar today. It's all about discipline. When you keep an account separate and you keep it in a place where it's just not accessible, keep it away from yourself, put it in a bank that's across town, put it in an account that's not easily accessible through an ATM card. So it's inconvenient to get to that money, but it's there when you need it. That's one of the secrets. So if $10 goes to that account per week, $40 will be sitting there at the end of the month. Is that a lot of money? For some it is, but $40 is certainly better than nothing. So Maddie, I'm not seeing any questions yet, or any questions coming into us. Okay, then I will go on with some of your questions. I wanted to catch some of them and tell you some of the things that I heard. It's just to tell you that I know that you guys brought us some really good points. You know, someone said from Pennsylvania, it's just too complicated. I can't save for an emergency. Well, I have to say that there are some easy mechanics like I just showed you that can make it possible. Separate it out 1% or a set amount, $10 a week. It can be done. Later on, we'll talk about how we begin to save some on the expense side. What else do people say? The challenge is what? The challenge is, this is what someone said from Illinois, discipline and consistency. From Iowa, just actually putting the money aside. Hey, it's easily done. Automate it. Let the system take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. Out of sight, out of mind. And a small amount you will never miss, believe me. Last thing I want to point out on this slide is the whole idea of that we often have, well, we often have within the multiple accounts, things that we don't even think about that don't happen every month. Taxes, annual insurance, tuition, etc. Those things are something else that is great to have a fund for. So if you have an emergency fund, great. And if you're able to set up one for even non-emergency funds, again, I understand that you may not have the funds for that, but these are the ways that we begin to help make the money work for us and have it set aside because you made the decision up front. There's many apps that help us do this too, which is fantastic. That means that it's easier in a sense because they make it easier for us to not have to do the work. It does the work for us and sets it aside. Let's talk about a few more things here in terms of how do we prioritize this, prioritize the push. So I've gone through a few things with you already, which is this. I introduced this session today by, unfortunately, some negative things. Visualize the pain and also visualize what the alternatives do if you do not have money set aside. And let's put your focus on the relief that you'll have, the sleep that you'll get, and the satisfaction you'll get by having a little money set aside. So now we come to the tough part of this seminar. How do we do it? I don't know of any other magical ways for us to do it, but to begin to push in the short term. That means this week, this month, this quarter, begin to sacrifice some short-term gains because you're going to make a long-term type of a gain here. How do you do that? Two levers we always have. The two levers is, what can I do to increase any source of income? Our two levers are income up or expenses down. Income up. There's all kinds of things. Driving an Uber, there's things where you do stuff on Poshmark, like my wife does. You buy things at thrift stores and you find ways to sell at a different price. You make things, you sell things, you have services that you can do. Be creative. I've had many times in my life where I've worked extra jobs, sometimes 2 or 3. Think of it as short term. It's short term. You just are looking to get that nest egg built up. And once you have that amount, then I'm not saying to pull back. I'm saying you at least have the ability to have a focus that doesn't have to be as intense. So that's the income side. Let's look at the expense side. I threw out some questions here for you to think about, especially in the sense that we've just come through COVID, and the COVID austerity has changed a lot of our lives. Again, I know of my own self, my wife, I know of others who just pulled back on getting their haircuts all the time. What things in your lives can you look at that you can pull back a little bit on in order to put a little extra aside? We want that emergency fund because it's going to relieve so much of the other pains that we face. So your questions were very, very good. What can I do? Again, there's some levers that we have to help push this. How do I start? Begin to automate it, somebody asked. What about unexpected expenses? This is all unexpected. So the fund, the small fund, is what takes the edge off of so many unexpected things that you face. So this emergency fund really solves, hopefully, the work you do to build it is far worth it when the time comes for you to use it. People often ask, how much should you put in there? And that's something you have to decide. It's one of the challenges that you have. And here's what I've read through all the articles getting ready for today. If you have only one income, this is the ideal. 6 to 12 months worth of expenses. That's huge. It's a lot. But I'm saying for you today, it starts with the first dollar. It starts with you putting aside something. You change yourself from simply being a spender to a spender and a saver when you put aside $10 per week, $5 per week. That savings is what is so critical and what changes your attitude, because you begin to see how you are actually building something that's going to allow you again to sleep at night. Gradually increase the savings. Don't do it all at once. Gradually increase it. And here's another great tip for people. They often say, well, how much should I put aside? Take a look over the last 6 months in your life and take a solid look at what unexpected things did come up, and try to put a number on that. Try to put a price on that and see if you can see what those things are. Okay, so let me just see some questions. I do see one that's come in, so let me ask this. Let me try and get this one coming through. How do we determine how to complete our W-4 form so that we have more in our paycheck and break even and receive get a small return? The secret of that is actually one of the tips I was going to use at the very end. If you have right now, if you make a point of claiming, if you have it so that you are claiming, and you're in this case here trying to have more in your paycheck, then what you want to do is have it such that you are not claiming people right now. Or actually, the more you claim, the more you claim for people right now, they will take less out of your paycheck today. So you want to have 2 or 3 as what you're claiming, and then they will have more in your paycheck. And if you claim it as 0, they will take less out of your paycheck. So you have the ability to manipulate the W-4 today. And this is one of those, it's a very good question, because, and everyone deals with this differently. So here's the question for everybody who's on the line. Do you want more money in your pocket each month that you decide with and then hopefully put in your emergency fund? Or do you let the government take more out of your check and then return it to you come April? It really goes back to what you are willing to do and how much discipline you have. If you have the discipline not to spend that extra money in your check each week and to save it, then by all means claim it so that you have a higher number, so they are taking out less money out of your check, and therefore more money is in your pocket. If you in fact don't have the discipline and you want to have a big return of money, then have it such that you have 0 claimants. They take out more money from you, and therefore they return it back to you in April. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever you feel disciplined to do. Hopefully that addressed that question with you. So let me move on. If there's any other questions, let me ask. See if there's any more questions. Okay. So again, I'm opening it up to you. So we're back to our prioritize. How do I prioritize? What can we do to increase the income side or decrease the expense side? That's what we've been talking about. Gradually increase the savings and keep track. All right, let's move on to the next point. All right, I like to throw this graph in because it's another good way for us to think about how we plan ahead and how we have a different shift, in the way that we look at things. And here's the key. For some folks saying, I have nothing, I can't budget it, I can't do it, I have nothing left, I've spent everything out. I would say to some folks on the line, if you try to leave the buying of new things or anything last, make buying last and use these other tips first. Start from the bottom. And when you are faced with things around the house, I need a table. Well, maybe you could use something else instead of the table. Maybe you have some other alternative. Maybe you can convert something that you have down in the basement to something you need to put something on. How about your neighbors? How about your friends? Can you borrow tools from them rather than buying them brand new? I have a neighbor across the street, a young woman who doesn't have a lawnmower. I just simply lend her my lawnmower every 2 weeks. That saves her $500 right there. Swap. Maybe she uses my lawnmower, but now and then I use something from her house. She might have extra tools that I need to use. Great. It's a win-win situation. Thrift. I like to point out this about thrift, that there is so much clothes. If people are buying new clothes, by all means, that is a way that there are so many alternatives. Let me just tell you a quick story about here in Boston area where I am. We have a place in Cambridge, which is right near Boston, that literally every single day brings 850 pounds of clothes and dumps it in the middle of a room. And it's called like the pit. You just go in and dig through it, and you pay by the pound. You could get pounds and pounds of clothes for a couple bucks. Now, on the weekends, it's not 850,000 pounds, it's over 2 tons of clothes. And if it's not bought up by people for a buck or two, they throw it away or they burn it. It's ridiculous. So thrift is a key way to make this happen. Make it, if you're good with clothes making or woodworking or food, make it yourself. And if you can't do any of those, then resort to buying it. Let me see a question here that's come in. I'm trying to read this right here. How do I handle my my insurance now that how do I, okay, let me just try and read this from, all right. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get this. Handle my insurance now. She's over 80 and wants to charge more increase. What is the alternative that we will make this affordable? Okay, all right. When you have certain premiums, again, I say that there's lots of room for negotiation on things. I would encourage that questioner or anybody to be aware of the fact that everything we deal with, there's always competition, and always recognize the fact that there are so many vendors vying for our money. Especially after COVID, a lot of them extremely need much more attention, and they're looking for that. So all I can suggest is trying to find ways to look for alternatives in that space there. Let me see, what else do we have here? Okay, I think we already answered that one. I'd like to see if others come in. Let me get some other questions that I had, try and bring them up here for a second. We've talked, some of the things that people had said is, having a shortfall in your budget. Again, it starts out by making a budget. A budget is the very first thing you have to do. And then through that, and then this recognizing that there's alternatives to buying first. There are alternatives like trying to use things around, trying to work with your friends, neighbors. A lot of times we can find that these do in fact satisfy and help us avoid the buying. I'm all for looking for things that allow us not to buy. Are there pantries, food pantries, where you're not spending out as much on food? I know here in the Boston area, there's many of them. Many of them have, as we're facing the winter time, places that will supplement or pay for your electric or your heat. They'll even do rent subsidies. I would say always look for these places that will help you pay those down first, and then try to minimize your expenses that way. Okay. I am coming to just some kind of final thoughts about this. It summarizes some of the points that we've made. I still want to open it up to questions that you have, and I will go to some of the other questions. In the end, as you're doing this, again, let's reiterate what we've talked about today. We are facing the fact that unexpected expenses are no fun, but they always are going to happen. So what do? We need to expect that they're going to happen and try to be prepared for them. It means some short-term pain to have a longer-term gain. What can we do to squeeze the expense side or increase the income side? Those would be some things that I would suggest. Okay. I want to point this out. Something that you, again, may not have heard or may have heard within the industry is called snowflake monies. Anytime, so not only do we often pay money that's unexpected, but sometimes we receive money that's unexpected. that's another great source of bolstering your emergency fund. Don't spend it, don't take it, as I sometimes have in classes I do. People will say, well, they go and take that money and they buy themselves a great new outfit or a great new sneakers or a great new TV. These things are unexpected. It's the perfect time for you to leverage them into something like a fund, which you will then use when you truly need it. Let me just see what I have here for another question coming in. Okay. Okay, Facebook Marketplace, very good. It's not a question, but they use Facebook Marketplace. I know that we do a lot of places here where I live, again, where people can see and can basically put stuff up for free. You give and you get up for free. How do I handle my mom's insurance? We did that one. Let me see. How do you get yourself out of a pay advance note? Okay, that's a good question. If you have a pay advance type of a situation, then what, again, it goes really back to your individual contract that you've done. I would say you really want to avoid situations on a pay advance note. If you're talking about like some kind of a money store, if that's what you're referring to, again, all I can say is try your best to pay that down as quickly as you possibly can. Those things are really places that can rip you off. And even if you have to take out a loan or borrow money, get rid of it and work with somebody else to really help you go down that pathway. There can be things there that you can get into a situation where that can be almost like a hole. There's lots of money advisors, helpful advisors. I mean, I'm a personal counselor, and there's many all around the country who work for nonprofits like ours. I would say get in touch with one of them. They often have services they can lead you to, whether they be legal services or other types of agencies that can help you. I would say that would probably be the way to go with that. Let me just go back to the final thoughts here for a second. Leveraging the snowflake monies, definitely when they appear, just as you would for anything, try to take advantage of that. Number 3, keep your liquid money. Once you've begun to build some of your your emergency fund, it has to be liquid. What does that mean? It means it has to be available. But I'm going to say here, make it not so available that you're able just to grab it and use it for things that are not really an emergency. Somebody wrote in and said they can't stop themselves when a birthday comes up or Christmas comes up or a holiday comes up. They spend that money. Well, this is where the discipline comes in, and this is where it comes that you can make that account less accessible. Go to a different bank across town. Have a credit union that does not have, for instance, today's automatic types of transfers or something. So the only way to get your money out of that bank is to get in your car and go there. I know that sounds kind of archaic, but do what it takes. Put your money with somebody you trust. Number 4, if you yourself cannot really hold yourself off from spending that money you've worked so hard to build up, can you hand it to somebody else you trust in your family or a friend and say, please do not allow me to use this money unless I've come up with an emergency. What's an emergency? Go to the next bullet point here. Establish what your guidelines for an emergency are. Try to work with yourself. Tell your family, tell your friends, this is my emergency fund and it's only supposed to be used for these purposes. So there's plenty of people, I'm sure, in your lives who are willing to help you to do this. Take advantage of them. Take advantage. And by doing that, if this is something that they know it's important, and I know that they will be glad to help you do it. Again, it goes back to someone you trust, though, and make sure that it's something that they've helped you to stay true to the true unexpected, necessary, or urgent issues you face, like we had at the very beginning of this session today. When you have one of those, by all means, you withdraw those funds, use them, feel good about it, but then, of course, you need to start building it up again as well. Any other questions coming in, Maddie? Let me just see if there's anything else. May ask for any other questions. Okay, I'm back down now to adjust your tax withholdings. This was brought up by one of the questioners in the class. I thought that was great. So back to one of the many tricks that are out there. Have less taxes taken out of each check, and that money, if you have less taxes taken out, that means you have more in your pocket this month. The key, though, is that you save that difference. If you don't do that and you spend it, you really haven't gained from it. It's almost like a lose-lose situation. Versus the other way, which again, some people do this. A lot of people I work with do this. Take more out of your taxes per check. And in this way, you're claiming like zero. You're saying, in a sense, I don't have the deduction, so the government thinks you don't, takes out more money. But what they do is when you now do your taxes come April, they go, oh, you don't really have all those deductions, so they give you all your money back. It means that the government had use of your money all that time, and that's up to you. If you want to have the money in your pocket or if you want to have the money in their pocket, bottom line is these are ways for you to deal with this. Okay, let me see. All right. Here's a question. Should you refinance if you only have 11 years left on your 30-year mortgage? Is it bad to do a loan modification? Okay, well, the answer for this one and for a lot of things, it very much depends. It depends on what kind of a loan and what kind of an interest rate you have today. And, you know, if you in fact have a very low interest loan, then there are these, and you know that that's, you know, something that you can afford, you do get the gain of the tax return on paying that principal. So it's something you have to kind of do the math on. If you are in fact have a low interest loan and yet you are getting some return on the payment of the principal, I mean the taxes, you in fact are getting a tax break. That's a tax break that most people do not get. That's a great tax break for homeowners. In terms of loan modifications, a loan modification is not bad. You say, is it bad? It's something that is necessary to avoid foreclosure, because it depends on your situation. But in the end, you always want to try to continue to pay your mortgage and recognize if you are in a challenge, if you're in a situation where you can't pay it, there's many ways for folks like loan modifications, which is simply a way you either reduce the overall principal, you lower the interest, and with a willing bank or mortgage broker, 9 times out of 10, they're willing to take some money rather than no money. Brokers and mortgage bankers don't want houses. They don't want your house. They would rather see the money flow. So again, not knowing your particular situation, those are considerations you can work out with a counselor, such as myself or someone who deals with foreclosure in some kind of like a community organization. They will help you make those decisions. It's a matter, it starts with you and everyone else with what? You go back to your budget. You begin to figure out how much money you have, how much money you spend, and then you begin to figure out what kind of leeway do you have to pay that mortgage or to pay it to an emergency fund. It all starts with doing that kind of a math, and then we look to do what we can to either increase the income side or decrease the expense side, and those two levers are always available to us as much as they, you know, for so many of us. So I'm going to just bring us to our last slide here and just simply say what our references are for today. I've used a bunch of very good sites. I like to point out a few of them. For those who are looking for more research and looking for more answers than what I provided in this little session, please check out the Balance or the CFPB site, which is Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Always has good information on it, always has good stuff that you can rely upon. And they're legitimate, everything you see there. The bank rate, I find them to be very practical in what they come out with, so I always look to them. Ramsey, I also have one that's not here today, but that's Trent Ham. Trent Ham is a great resource, by the way, has a blog and so much information on so many topics that we talk about and many others. I want to say thank you all for all that attended today, and I wish you all the best. If you have questions from anything we've said today, my name is Peter Mullen. My email is pmullen@consumercredit.com. You can write me. Just tell me that you're on the webinar. I'd be glad to try to address any questions that you might have. So with that, I thank you all very much, and we're going to close up for today. So thank you.